Phase 2 RFP webinar. My name is Danielle O'Hara. I'm a project consultant with the U.S. Endowment for Forestry and Communities, and I'm joined on this webinar by Alan McGregor, who is the Vice President of the U.S. Endowment for Forestry and Communities. Alan and I work together on the Sustainable Forestry Land Retention Program. The purpose of today's webinar is to give you a brief overview of the U.S. Endowment for Forestry and Communities and the Sustainable Forestry African American Land Retention Program, and to go through the request for proposals and to entertain your questions about the RFP. Alan is going to start with the overview, and we'll pause for questions about the endowment and the overall Sustainable Forestry Land Retention Program, and then I'll continue with the RFP, and at the end we'll have time for general questions and answers. I want to note that everyone but the presenters are on mute, so when we pause for questions after Alan's overview, and then also at the very end, you'll need to type your questions into the question box on the right side of your screen. Cameron Toomey, who is also with the endowment, is helping us with the technical part of this webinar, so it's fine to submit your questions as they come to you, and Cameron will read them during the question periods that we have. So with that, I want to pass this over to Alan.
Thank you, Danielle. I appreciate it, and appreciate everybody else for being with us today. See if I can add. I want to first talk about the partnership that's bringing this opportunity forward. This project has been for the past 3 years a cooperative project between USDA and the U.S. Endowment for Forestry and Communities. Specifically, the USDA Forest Service and the Natural Resources Conservation Service have been primary partners, both by funding the project as well as being very active in their support both nationally and at the state levels. And so that's the three-part partnership that's primarily responsible for getting this on the ground and working with our community-based partners. I want to go back and talk. The endowment will be managing this project, and so you'll be submitting your applications here, and we do a lot of the coordination and evaluation and things of that nature. So I want to tell you a little bit about the endowment if you don't know about us already. The endowment was started with a $200 million allocation of funds from Canada under the Softwood Lumber Agreement of 2006. Those of you who know forestry pretty well probably have seen that Canada and the United States sometimes get in struggles over the price of softwood lumber and have to negotiate that out. And so the settlement in 2006 included allocations to a number of nonprofits who had to do with the forest industry as well as communities that are forest reliant. And so that's how the endowment ended up with the $200 million allocation to open up and start. Our headquarters are in Greenville, South Carolina, and under that agreement we had two primary purposes. One, to keep those working forests as forests and keep them as healthy as possible, so we work on that. And the second was a mandate to help forest-reliant communities be economically vibrant. As you know, there has been a lot of dislocation in our rural communities that are forest-reliant because of changes in markets and globalizations and things of that nature. And so we are working to redefine those local economies around still using the forest productively. So this project fits quite well into both those purposes. And everything we do under our agreement is ultimately to support the North American forest industry. We are unlike many foundations in the way we operate. First of all, everything we do, we try and make it systemic, transformative, and sustainable. And instead of making, bringing in hundreds of proposals every year and funding scores of them, we really do fewer projects, but do them strategically within 7 initiative areas. And you can see those initiative areas as you go up this road here. The one that this project fits under is asset creation. And by asset creation, we mean working with families and forested communities to build wealth and increase income from wood-based enterprise, and also to use the assets of the forest in order to create that wealth. Screen's being a little slow here. Thank you. Talk a little bit about how we got to the point of starting this project with USDA agencies. Back in 2013, we were quite aware of the loss of African American land, particularly in the southeast region. And in studying that, the best numbers we could find at the time was that we had gone from 16 to 19 million acres of black-owned land around the turn of the 20th century. And that had dwindled to less than 7 million acres back in the 1990s when this best data was created. You might have seen numbers around like 2 to 3 million acres remaining, and that's coming from a study about farmland that's actively farmed. So we've dwindled down to 2 or 3 million acres of actively managed farmland by African Americans, but the total land owned by African Americans is about 7 million under the best data we've got. We also anecdotally knew, and from our experience of being around and working in this field, that the forests owned by African Americans in the region were undermanaged for income and ecological value. And the more we've done the project and gotten more research, we're confirming that. Now, that's not a problem that's limited to African American forest owners. That's true for many across the board, but it's particularly acute for African American landowners, and that's because of some of the dislocation of African Americans away from the programs that support both private programs and government programs that support active and managed forestry. And of course, that's coming out of a history of discrimination which has tended to push landowners away from those resources. So part of this intent is to bridge those gaps that have been created by that history of discrimination. The goals we set out for the program from the beginning were to use sustainable forestry to stabilize land ownership across generations. Not only did we feel like it's important that people be getting maximum income and asset value from their land, but also we know heirs property plays a big role in the loss of land and the undermanagement of land as well, particularly for African Americans. So we put this idea of working on heirs property right aside, getting our forests managed, because we knew that heirs property keeps people away from government programs, keeps them also out of even working with a logger or getting credit. And then the second goal is certainly to build family wealth through income and asset value increase, and also that goal that the endowment has of forest retention and health certainly works with this program as well. When we started in 2013, we had our first RFP. We had about 17 proposals into that RFP, and there were 3 regions that we selected to work in between that for over a 30-month period in order to really test our theory of change and see if this program would work. And we feel like we've been successful in this and showing that the ideas that we had are being successful, and so we've decided to move into the second phase. The first areas we are concentrated in are northeastern North Carolina, and the lead organization there is the Roanoke Electric Cooperative through their nonprofit subsidiary, the Roanoke Center. They cover about 7 counties up in northeastern North Carolina. The second area was coastal South Carolina. The lead organization is Center for Heirs Property Preservation. They are primarily a group doing work to clear heirs property, but have taken on the Sustainable Forestry Project as a way to also stabilize their once they get title clear, they need ways for people to sustain their property, and forestry is a big asset for that. They're covering about, at this point, they started with 8 counties in coastal South Carolina, now expanding into a region of 23 counties, both on the coast and in the I-95 corridor. And then West Alabama, we're talking here about the counties kind of up against the western border of Alabama, a little bit north of the border to the south, and kind of right in the middle there of the border on Mississippi. And there are 2 organizations working in that area, Limited Resource Landowner Education and Assistance Network, or as we know them, LR-LEAN, and the Federation of Southern Cooperatives Land Assistance Fund. These projects will continue under Phase 2. As a matter of fact, they've been funded and started work on Phase 2 in October. I can get this, there it goes. So I wanted to show you just partly so you would see what I was talking about these regions. but also let you know the kind of the way people put the counties together. So we're talking about in this program multi-county regions of service, and those can be rather limited, small, or they could be larger depending on the capacity and the focus of the program. The one up there in northeastern North Carolina, we've added 2 counties onto that one to get to their 7. But this will give you an example of the kind of regions we're talking about. So if there's any questions about the endowment or about the intent of the program, I'd be glad to take them now, and Cameron will pass them on to me if he's got a couple questions. If not, we're going to give you a minute to think about that, and then we'll go on to Danielle to talk about the current RFP.
So far, Alan, we have had no questions submitted. I'll remind everyone that you can use the questions panel in your control panel on the right of your screen to submit those questions.
Okay, wait a second here. Okay, well, Cameron, do you see any questions coming?
So far, no.
Okay, well, let me pass it on to Danielle then.
All right, thank you, Alan. So this brings us to the present and our current request for proposals. So we are seeking to expand the program to 2 or 3 additional project sites to the states that we have listed here: Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi, West Tennessee, East Texas, and so those are kind of the forested regions of those states, and Virginia. Let's see. Get this to move forward. Let's see, that's not. I'm not sure what. Oh,
Hold on 1 second, Danielle.
okay. We good?
Yep, is that the next slide?
Yeah, so should I do it, or will you do it?
You should still have control.
Okay, good. So we, as with the existing sites, the new sites that we seek to bring onto the project will focus on the key goals that Alan mentioned: stabilize land ownership across generations, build family wealth, and improve forest retention and health.
Give me 1 second. Okay, we should be good now.
Okay, sorry about that. Let's see. I'm not moving it forward.
It seems to be getting hung up on the slide.
Yeah. Sorry for our technical difficulty.
Just 1 second.
Of course, this worked so well during our rehearsal this morning. No problems at all.
All right. So can you go back one? Yeah. And
Okay.
should I be able to move it forward, or should I let you move it forward, Cameron?
Test it really quickly.
Okay. No, it doesn't seem to want to move forward.
Okay, you can just let me know when you need me to advance.
Yeah, why don't I do that? So the time period for this phase 2, which the RFP is for July 2016 to the end of September 2019. I note here that once selected, projects will be eligible for renewed funding each year based on performance until 2019. And so it's not that you would get your project approved and then automatically have funding until 2019, but at the end of each year there'd be an assessment, and based on your performance you would get funding again. So next slide.
Another technical difficulty. Apologies, we're freezing up. Are we back up?
Okay, yep. So in terms of funding, the endowment will provide up to a total of $490,000 over a 3-year period to each lead organization in the counties and the regions that are selected. So like I said earlier, that funding will be renewed on an annual basis based on performance, with up to $175,000 a year for the first 2 years, and then it will decrease for the 3rd year, which we see as kind of a transitional year. The match for the project is a 25% minimum. We're not asking for matching sources at this stage to be identified in your proposals, but we want to see evidence of your capacity to identify sources and to raise funds. And just if you look at this little graphic at the bottom of the project, when we talk about performance, what we're wanting to see are, initially that plans are in place and you're working with folks on heirs property issues, on establishing management plans, but then that you're moving beyond planning to actually getting practices on the ground, and that folks are actually able ultimately to move their goods to market. So really kind of wanting to see people moving through that whole spectrum of activities. Next slide. Great. So as you saw in the RFP, the applicants are lead organizations in these regions. And we're looking to those lead organizations to define and coordinate and manage a comprehensive, flexible, multi-partner network that will provide services to Black Forest landowners. We'll talk more about the expectations and responsibilities of the lead organization in subsequent slides. Go ahead, Cameron. Next slide. First, though, I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about these success factors. So, based on our experience with the pilot phase of the project, we identified a set of factors that we know are really critical to the success of the Sustainable Forestry Land Retention Program. And part of what we're going to be looking for in your proposals is the presence of these attributes. And so, one of the goals that we have with this webinar is just to be really clear as possible about the criteria that we're going to be using to review proposals. So I want to ask you to bear with me as I go through these next couple of slides, but this is a lot of what we're going to be looking for in the proposals. So the first thing is this lead organization that is known and trusted at multiple levels. It's an organization that currently has or is able to earn. Hello?
Yep.
Am I on? I'm sorry, my screen went down. Is able to earn the respect and kind of relationship with community-based organizations, landowners, agencies, kind of a broad spectrum of folks. That organization also has got to have management capacity to both manage that network that we talked about, but also manage an organization and manage frontline staff that is working at the ground level. So it's an organization that kind of has management capacity in various ways. We found in the pilot that proximity to the project site is really important, that this is not necessarily a project to be done from a distance, but that relationships with landowners are so much day-to-day, so proximity is really important. One of the key staff people in this project is a forester, And so that person needs both to have technical capacity, really know their stuff in terms of forestry, but then be able to translate and communicate this information to the landowners that they're working with. So not just knowledgeable, but also relational. It goes without saying that that person has trusting and respectful relationships with landowners, but also that patience is a key part of the project. We've found that sometimes it takes a little while for landowners to get off the ground with the project, just because there's a lot of information that is coming to them. But also we're talking about their assets, and we're talking about, when we talk about land ownership, we get into talking about their families, and these are not necessarily decisions that can be made quickly, and so there's a lot of hanging in there with the landowner. Next slide, please. And in addition to, just kind of hanging in there with the landowner, there's time on that person's land or that family's land just really to understand what the reality is that they're working with. We have found that landowner education is really critical, and our current sites actually have programs that are fairly comprehensive and really build on one another. It's not landowner education in terms of just kind of one workshop and then you're done, but really what we're looking for is a comprehensive program that really enables landowners to build capacity in, kind of knowledge of their forests, knowledge of kind of how to manage these forests and what kind of options they have for doing that, and then ultimately marketing their goods. And so it's a comprehensive program to the point where actually landowners might have enough knowledge to start sharing this information with their peers and start kind of replicating the program on their own, really. We have found that clear accountability for outcomes is critical. Like with any program, this program will need a strategic plan, and in that plan we'll want to know kind of who's responsible for what and when, and that there is kind of clear an agreed upon understanding of what the outcomes for the project are. Obviously, consistent and effective communication, and that is, kind of between the lead organization and the multiple partners that they're working with, be it landowners, the partners in their network, the endowment. Just communication is really important. Public agency participation, we'll talk a little bit more about this when we're really kind of fleshing out what the network is, but as Alan mentioned, Natural Resources Conservation Service and U.S. Forest Service are key partners for the endowment, and they're represented on each of the landowner networks, as are Farm Services Agency and the state forestry agencies and many other organizations, and we'll talk more about that later. And then finally, just kind of in terms of success factors, we're really looking for projects where sustainable forestry and African American land retention really support the organization's mission. So we have projects in our current program that are not forestry or kind of legal organizations, but they have really integrated this work into their mission. So we're not looking for sites that will implement the project and then be done when the funding is over. We're looking for projects that really kind of can have a vision for how this supports their mission moving forward. Next slide, please. So this criteria kind of goes back to the success factors that I was talking about earlier. So, we're going to want to see evidence that, kind of the lead organization is trusted and has the capacity that I talked about. You're going to need to have a comprehensive plan for forestry services. That's a key part of this project, and so really we want to understand how you're working with building those relationships with forestry service providers, how you're linking landowners to those forests, what those services, kind of what the plans are for developing management plans and getting practices on the ground, and et cetera. Similarly, we want to see built-out plans for land tenure, whether it's working with landowners to, kind of clear up their air property issues, or, kind of of get estate plans in place, whatever the needs are, we want to see that you have capacity and have a plan and set of systems for kind of moving that forward. And then finally, this last thing, strategies to spread knowledge. This is really what we call diffusion of innovation. It goes back to this landowner education that I was talking about earlier, that we want to see kind of what your plan is to kind of move this information into the communities. And really, I think the landowners are going to be the vehicle for this. So what's the system that you have in place to kind of support and network landowners to be able to spread knowledge? Next slide. So we talked about these already, the programs, activities that we'll want to see, the land tenure program, the forestry services, forestry education. Next slide. We want to see clearly kind of how you're connecting landowners to the different service programs available to them, whether it's in the government or whether it's with, you know, kind of private industry and with forestry professionals. So, you know, kind of we are working with government partners, but also working with the private sector, and we really want to see kind of how you're connecting landowners to all of those different entities. And then finally, you know, kind of how you're helping landowners identify and access and connect with whether it's grant programs or loan programs or different ways that they can fill capital gaps. Next slide, please. So the program strategies, the key strategy for this program is this system of support, the landowner system of support that I've talked about a little bit, and I'll flesh out just a little bit more. And then we've got a set of reinforcing strategies that I'll talk about in a minute. Could we go to the next slide, please? So that forest landowner system of support, what we want to see in that, this is your network, the network that, you know, kind of the lead organization is identifying and pulling together and really, you know, kind of helping to give life. You're looking for expertise to support landowners, you know, so everything from the legal to the forestry technical. You might need community development professionals. You know, you'll figure out, you know, what the needs are and then have partners in your network that are responding to those needs. And those needs will change over the life of the project, over the life of the time that you're working with landowners. So at one point, the focus might be on education or on developing forest management plans, but once you have those in place, you might notice that your needs are more in terms of, you know, kind of helping landowners access capital. So you'll want to bring in partners that can respond to that need. So part of what the lead organization's role is to kind of be on top of and, you know, kind of keeping the pulse of what the needs are as they emerge and identifying partners to bring in to respond to those needs. The relationships are broad. So, you know, I mentioned some government partners that really need to be part of the network, but there'll be nonprofits, there'll be folks in the private industry, and there'll be community-based organizations that you'll want to include as well. Next slide, please. And this is just a list of kind of illustrative sectors that you might have represented on your network. Next slide, please. The reinforcing strategies are programs that the endowment implements, and so you're implementing, you know, kind of you're taking care of the landowner system of support, that network, and, you know, kind of getting your forestry practices or your forestry program running and your legal services program running. And the endowment has a set of programs that are in support of what you do. And so the Forestry Services Fund is a fund that's kind of co-funded by the endowment and the U.S. Forest Service, and that's available by application to complement, to kind of fill gaps that you're not able to fill in the programs, the forestry programs that you're trying to implement. We have a learning community that's intended to really kind of support the learning and the networking and the connecting between the different project sites. Currently we have 4, and we seek to move up to 6 or 7 project sites. You're all doing really kind of innovative, interesting work, and we want to keep that communication going between and among the sites and really kind of networking those sites. So the learning community facilitates that communication, the networking, as well as tries to bring some content learning to the sites based on what you identify as needs for building your capacity. So we have webinars, we do peer-to-peer conference calls, we have an annual retreat. So that's the learning community. We have a research component, which in the first phase really focused on getting baseline data about African American forest land ownership in the South. Alan talked about kind of the paucity of information that currently is available. We're really kind of trying to increase the, kind of the baseline, the data available to us. And so we've worked with U.S. Forest Service, their researchers, to kind of do that research, as well as to do some research on networking and how that works, whether it's kind of among landowners, in the interest of this diffusion of innovation that I talked about, or whether it's among institutions, kind of like how is it that those landowner support networks are really functioning to move landowners forward. So that's the research piece, and then finally there is a program evaluation piece. We have an external evaluator which does an evaluation of the overall program, but then yearly we do internal assessment of each project, and this is a really critical piece of the project because we seek to learn from it, and like we said, funding is tied to progress on a yearly basis. Next slide, please. So this is should look familiar, it's the application outline. We kind of have laid out an outline, a flow that we'd really like to ask you to follow as you're preparing your proposal, because we'll need to compare proposals. We're asking for a lot of information, and so have not established a page limit, but really would like to ask you to err on the side of brevity. Just keep in mind that we'll be reading several proposals. And the application is, we're going to ask for general information, but then we really kind of want to move into how it is that you understand sustainable forestry and kind of how it connects with your mission. So this is back to those success factors that we talked about earlier. We really kind of want to see that you have a vision for this and that it kind of connects with your own forward movement. We'll want to see, kind of your the programs really kind of fleshed out, your forestry program and the legal program fleshed out. We'll want to understand your plans for identifying folks and bringing folks into that landowner support network. We kind of want to understand kind of what your process will be and what that will look like, and your plans for kind of growing it and sustaining it. We'll want to know something about your plans for diffusion of information, and then we'll want to have information about just kind of your management capacity. So each part of the application is going to track back to those success factors that we talked about. Next slide. Just want to say a little bit about the overall process schedule. We released the RFP a couple of weeks ago, February 8th. Proposals will be due on April 4th. That's 5 weeks from now, and they will be due at 5:00 p.m. Eastern, 4:00 p.m. Central. And we hope to have our review and grant selected by the end of June, so that we can start the project by July 26th. That's the information that we wanted to put out to you. We kind of want to pause now to really answer any questions that you might have, make sure that you're as clear as possible as you go into preparing your proposals. And we'll have this conversation, but you see our contact information up on the screen now. We are totally available by email and telephone. Start with me and then move on to Alan. If you don't get what you need. And also on this slide you'll see the link to the U.S. Endowment website, and the RFP is posted at the website. This recording of this webinar and these slides will be up on the website, so it definitely can be a resource to you. So I'm going to pause and see if folks have any questions.
Danielle, we do have one question from your funding slide. And it's whether or not match can include in-kind or cash only.
It's a cash match. We want to see dollars, 25% in dollars.
Okay, that's the only question we have as of now. We can wait a few minutes. Again, if people want to submit questions, use the question panel on the right.
I might say just the cash match is important because we don't want these projects to come to an end after the 3-year funding period we have. So part of the selection is organizations that we feel could carry those projects on in some form. That's why we want to see integration into the overall program strategies of organizations, as well as the capacity to raise other monies.
Okay, another question. How many total proposals will be funded?
We are will definitely fund 2, possibly 3 in different regions.
Okay, a question about the timeline of projects. Are no cost extensions possible?
So the timeline of projects. Go ahead, Al.
So if you, well, yes, and part of it's built in here. Our phase 2 for our original projects will be ending in October, 3 years from when they began, October 2015, and be winding down at that point. And these new projects will go a little bit longer into October of 2019. If you have a reason to extend beyond that to get the work done, that would be considered. But generally, we are thinking that we will be winding the program down at that point. So it would be, it'd be considered, but we would like to have most of the work done by the end of the period for sure.
Okay, a point of clarification, is it a total of 2 or 3 projects or that number per region?
A total of 2 or 3 projects. Correct, sorry, I wasn't clear about that.
Okay, we can wait another minute to see if anyone has some final questions.
So we currently have the 4 organizations funded in the 3 regions, so we're really looking to add 2 or 3 more regions and states other than the ones we're already funding in. So that would give us a total of 6 to 7 projects in this network.
Okay, a couple more questions have come in. Will there be a future RFP, or is this the only window to apply in the next 3 years?
This is this will be the only opportunity to apply for the next 3 years. So this is the final RFP planned on this program.
Okay. Next question. Is there a minimum or maximum number of counties you would like to see included?
That's a good question.
I'll take a shot at that.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, so what we've learned so far is that we've seen 2 directions taken. One is that a cluster of 8 counties turned out to be a lot for the capacity of some of our organizations, and so the idea there was, and they also were very successful early on in stirring interest in the program, and in their work with NRCS on like EQIP program, they were able to fund a bunch of landowners both for plans as well as practices, and they have not wanted to grow that region because they have so much activity within it with the resources that they have, that they're trying to concentrate in that area. Another example would be our South Carolina project is going from 8 counties to 23 counties, and that's partly because they've been able to use this program as a leveraged in order to grow their whole organization and operation. And so they are still operating very intensely in the counties that they started with, but beginning to expand their services more broadly. So our expectation would be that it would be perfectly fine to go from 3 counties up to whatever number you think you have the capacity to manage. We'll be looking very carefully at that question, though, because our main thing is to take landowners through the process where we are actually measuring things happening on their property. So we're not really measuring how many meetings it takes or the information given out, but what is actually happening in the forest on the land owned by the landowners in the program. So our priority would be a very comprehensive work with the number of landowners that can be managed rather than going for very large numbers of landowners in the program. Partly that's a theory that we have of this diffusion of innovation, that what we need is a cluster of landowners who have done very well in the program, who have learned a lot and are able to pass on their example to other people in the communities. So that would argue for just making sure you've got the resources to really serve the landowners you bring into the project. And you'll be working with other organizations like NRCS and those state forestry commissions on funding programs they have. So it's partly going to be how you define your partnership with those agencies, how much funding they think they can get out to your landowners, and what those processes would be over the time that you have to work with the landowners.
Yeah, and I just want to underscore just the point that Alan was making about your capacity to, kind of serve the landowners and work with your partners. A lot really kind of is incumbent on you to really kind of think through what is your capacity, kind of to, as you're identifying where you'll be working, you'll want to definitely be doing that with your capacity and your ability in mind.
So there's kind of a complication here. So we won't necessarily pick the organizations that can do the most, because we want to see the organizations too who are closest to the communities and what they can do building on their capacity within those regions. So, so it's a little tricky. So you should not be hesitant to propose a relatively small number of counties if that's what you can really do the best work in.
Alan, a follow-up question to this discussion. Can the counties be spread out, or do they need to be in close proximity?
We have had some experience in having a core cluster of counties, but finding opportunities in surrounding counties, or those are not necessarily contiguous, but we would expect that most of the activity would be in proximity to the organizations, so we wouldn't want them to get too spread out.
Right, so there's the question of your ability to service those counties, so like Alan is saying, kind of proximity to the organization itself, and there is this piece around kind of the landowner networking, so you want to be working in a circumscribed enough area where kind of information is able to flow.
Also, you have to have, for instance, if you start getting in a bunch of different areas of NRCS state office, you're going to have to duplicate your relationships with the support partners in each one of those areas.
Yeah, definitely. Something to keep in mind as you're developing your projects.
Okay, next question. Does the program funding apply to any forest type, for example, pine, hardwood, upland, bottomland?
That's great.
Absolutely. Yep. We are looking for people to remember, we're working both for profitability and ecological value. So, and one of the things we have learned in our baseline research is that the landowners we're working with have multiple interests on their land, much like other landowners. So there's a lot of concentration on ecology and on wildlife and on sort of aesthetic value as well as the monetary value. So we appreciate that, and we would like the landowners to be served towards their interests.
Okay.
And even within, kind of market value, we're looking at various different types of activities. So some might be, kind of timber market, but timber value, but it might also be non-timber products and services. And so, kind of hunting or recreation or other activities as well.
Another question that should come up, we should have led with, is that many of our forest landowners also have agricultural activities on their land. And we really believe that those are important, and obviously NRCS and some of your extension and your college and university programs are going to be working with landowners in that way. The money in this program is intended for use on work on the forests, but that doesn't mean you can't think more holistically with other monies that you might bring into the program.
Okay, speaking of funding, is the funding upfront or is it reimbursable?
No, it's up front.
Okay.
So it's up front per quarter at this point. In other words, you can invoice in advance of a quarter for a payment.
Okay, we have a question about eligibility. Can an extension service submit a proposal?
Extension service partnered with a community-based organization would be able to submit a proposal. I'm not sure an extension service by itself, unless it could prove unusual circumstances and its closeness to the community and its capacity, would work. But we would, you might want to call us and talk through the details on that one.
Okay, when you speak of landowners, what's the average acreage size of the current project's landowners?
That's such a good question. The response is it varies. But yeah, some of our landowners are as small as 10 acres, but go up to, I don't know what the largest is. Do we?
Well, several thousand. Our average right now is about 99 acres. We feel like there are enough landowners out there, African American landowners in our region, where you can have a fairly high average. So, you know, we think about 20 acres and above as being able to have some sort of productive forestry. 40 acres maybe being a good product there. So we had, in the beginning, asked people to average at least 40 in their programs, and they've been able to exceed that. So we've got this new higher average than that of our properties. So it's just thinking out what can be done productively within those forests to actually help increase income and asset value.
Great.
So in other words, if you have, we would not want a cluster. We would not want half the people to have 10 acres. We would want there to be a good mix of acreage size when we get in there.
So we've had two more questions about eligibility. One about for-profit organizations and one for state forestry agencies.
For eligibility, right. State forestry agencies, we would think, would need to partner with a community-based organization to come forward on the proposal. And what was the second category? I'm sorry.
For-profit.
Oh, for-profit. Interesting question. We obviously understand the importance of our for-profit partners being part of this. I still think you can call us and we can talk through what your thinking is on that. But we would probably want some sort of community-based organization affiliated with that as well. But please call us if you think there's an argument in a different direction.
Okay.
Danielle, is that the way you would answer that?
Yeah.
Okay. Right.
We can talk about it.
We can wait another minute or two for final questions. Okay, Alan and Danielle, that looks to be it for now.
Okay. Well, good. Thank you, Cameron, for fielding those. And thank you all for being on the webinar. Like we said, we still have up that last slide with our contact information. Please, if other questions come to you, let us know. We're available and available to kind of talk through the application and just kind of make clear things that maybe weren't clear enough on the webinar as you dive into the proposals. So we look forward to receiving your proposals, and you'll be hearing from us as we move forward on this process. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.